Listen closely as I share with you some information that you are entitled to know and that I hope you share with others. The truth about your world that you live in, the banking system and the war machine known as the beast. There is a ruling class that controls this world through pure manipulation based on media throughout your TV and currency controlled by the banking cartels and the Federal Reserve. I'll start this in 1775, where King George outlawed interest-free money, thus sparked our American Revolution, which we won in 1783. But that was only the beginning of a war that has lasted to this day with the banking cartels. They believe in a central bank, an institution that creates and issues a currency for an entire nation. They control the interest rates and the inflation and the money supply itself, loaning money to the government with interest. They essentially regulate the value of the currency issued. The entire structure can only produce one thing: debt. So every dollar produced has a debt attached to it. So where does the money come from to pay for this debt? More money. And more money and more debt equals slavery. A self-generating debt-slave system. Thomas Jefferson believed banking establishments were more dangerous than standing armies. What does that tell you? JFK warned us, and they killed him for it. In the early 1900s, J.P. Morgan, the Rockefellers, the Warburgs, and the Rothschilds devised a plan, a grand scheme to create another central bank. And what they did is they used their influence of the time and created rumors that the banking system was going to collapse. This started a mass panic, and most of the banks and the people started to call in their loans, causing the recipients to sell the property and causing a collapse. This created a spiral of bankruptcies and repossessions and turmoil that was never ending. Now, after this collapse, a commission was formed. Now, this commission was headed by Nelson Aldrich, who later married into the Rockefeller family. His answer for the crisis was simple: install a central bank so that the crisis could never happen again. So in 1910, there was a secret meeting held on Jekyll Island off of Georgia. There, the Central Banking Bill and Federal Reserve Act were written, not by lawmakers, but by banksters. In 1913, with heavy political sponsorship, Woodrow Wilson became president, having already agreed to sign the Federal Reserve Act in return for campaign support. In the long run, selling out this country to the bankster cartel. Now, a few days before Christmas, on December 22nd, when much of Congress was at home with their families, the Federal Reserve Act was voted in, and Wilson, in turn, made it a law. It's at this point in history we officially met the beginning of our demise, and the public was told that this would serve as an economic stabilizer and that the economic crisis was a thing of the past and would never happen again. And this history has shown us that has been nothing farther from the truth. This gave them a machine for economic manipulation, and from 1914 to 1919 they increased the money supply, resulting in extensive loans to small banks and to the public. Then in 1920, the Fed deliberately detracted the credit in an extreme way, making banks call in large amounts of loans. Just like in 1907, collapse occurred. Numerous banks outside the Federal Reserve System collapsed, causing the Fed to buy up all these banks for cheap, creating a monopoly. 1920 was just a warm-up, because from 1921 to 1929, the Fed again increased the money supply, resulting once again in an extensive loan out to the banks, to the people, and creating the broker call loan, which allowed a person to pay only 10% down on that loan. The catch was that this loan could be called back within 24 hours. So a few months before October 1929, J.P. Morgan, the Rothschilds, Rockefellers and Company began quietly pulling out of the stock market, knowing the bubble was about to burst. Then on October 29th, 1929, the financiers started calling in their loans en masse. It was a huge setup. This resulted in a huge sell-off that eventually collapsed thousands of banks and sparking the Great Depression. The Fed then once bought up all the failed banks at this point at very discounted prices, adding to their monopoly, crushing the people of America. And instead of increasing the money supply, they actually contracted it, fueling the Great Depression. Now, Mr. Louis McFadden then sought to go after them. But at the same time, the banksters got greedy and made a grab for all of our gold in this country. So under the pretense of saving the economy, the president made an executive order for all the gold to be turned in by May 1st, 1933, or face the threat of imprisonment for up to 10 years. They robbed a already crippled country through the gold seizure in 1933. And in 1933, the gold standard was abolished, something JFK was trying to bring back, and another reason that he was killed. Money before 1933 said that it was redeemable in gold. Today, your dollar just is legal tender, meaning it is worthless. The only thing that gives our money value today is the public's faith in it and how much is in circulation. It's also important to understand that the Federal Reserve is a private company. It's not federal at all, no more federal than Federal Express. It makes its own policies and loans money to the government at interest and creating a worldwide slave system. Going back to 1913, they also passed a federal income tax, which we all see today. It is completely unconstitutional, as it is a direct, unapportioned tax, and acquired number of states in order to be ratified. The amendment to allow it was never met, and that stands to this day. So illegally, everyone gives roughly 25% or 3 months out of the year's worth of work for nothing. Nearly 100% of your taxes go back to the interest on the current debt fiat currency, keeping this money system flowing, feeding this huge money machine. Stop paying taxes, take our money back to the gold standard, destroy the Federal Reserve, and you can save this country. It's the only way, aside from eliminating the evil persons involved in this. I beg you to do your research. There was no law saying or stating that you must pay taxes. Money monopoly is only one part of this grand scheme. The other part is the business of war, biggest of which being World War I, II, and Vietnam. Now, no one wanted anything to do with World War I, so they had to draw the people in. So they sunk the Lusitania, deliberately, killing 1,200 people. This caused a wave of anger in America, and shortly after, we entered into the war. This is the first prime example of a staged false flag attack that the blinded people easily accepted. The same method has been used time and time again throughout history, all the way up to 9/11, up to Sandy Hook, and on into any future events that we see here on out. Now, on December 7th, 1941, Franklin Delano Roosevelt knew that the Japanese were going to attack Pearl Harbor. He happily let this happen. They broke codes weeks beforehand and watched them march across the ocean. Before Pearl Harbor happened, 83% of Americans wanted nothing to do with the war. After the day of Pearl Harbor, 1 million men volunteered to go to war. The second grand scheme false flag attack blinding the people. It is important to note that the Nazi war machine only held up because of two institutions, IG Farben and the Rockefellers' U.S. Standard Oil. The German Air Forces could not operate without a special additive patented by the U.S. Standard Oil. Thus, the bombings of London was only made possible by a $20 million sale of oil from the U.S. Standard Oil Company. This is one of the examples of how they funded both sides of the war. Another treasonous corporation was the Union Banking Corp of New York City. That helped Hitler funnel money and launder money through New York City. Now, once this was exposed, it was taken down, and lo and behold, the leader of this operation, director and vice president, was Prescott Bush. These two gentlemen's elder, they staged the Gulf of Tonkin and entered Vietnam. They did Flight 103 Pan Am, the first attack on the World Trade, the USS Cole, the Atlanta Olympic bombings, Oklahoma City bombings, 9/11, and all the recent shootings. They have staged all these events, and the most recent is a run for our guns. They have passed bill after bill stripping our freedoms, from the Patriot Act to the NDAA, and they will not stop so long as they remain in power. You can expect another big event in the very near future, followed by a designed economic collapse and the implementation of full martial law, taking everything that you have and sending you to FEMA camps. This is a reality, and those who refuse will be the first victims. An event is coming, and it will change history. Now you may ask yourself, how can we stop this beast, this war machine? Well, there is a way. It's called awakening, and it begins now. As you're hearing these very words, we are one. We must fight as one at all cost. They will pick us apart if every one of us flee into the mountains and flee into the woods. It takes sacrifice. It takes will. It takes love. It takes courage. And we must stand and fight as one. That is the only way it can be won. The one thing they fear is a free thinking, well-informed, armed society. We can crush their standing army, reset our currencies back to the gold standard, and defend this country's freedom. But it starts with you. Be love. Be legendary. Be free. I love all you.